As Americans across the country gathered with family to celebrate the holidays, the Trump campaign gave its supporters a toolkit of sorts for engaging those at the table. A website, snowflakevictory.com, composed of bullet points and videos on a dozen issues ranging from the economy to Trump and minorities to impeachment. The site's purpose, to arm Trump supporters with talking points to take on their liberal relatives, or as the Trump campaign calls them, snowflakes. The site had some basic Republican positions like this one on health care. Ask your relative if they like going to the DMV. Now tell them to imagine the government controlling their health care system, because that's exactly what it would be like. But some points were truly Trumpian, ripped nearly word for word from his Twitter feed. Here's how the site encourages his supporters to push back on impeachment. President Trump asked for nothing in exchange for lethal military aid to Ukraine. He didn't tie the aid to any actions by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian president didn't know the aid was under any delay. Impeaching President Trump has always been an election tactic. Democrats have never accepted the results of the last election, so they're trying to interfere with the next one. Joining us at the table, Lynette Lopez, a columnist with Business Insider, and Jenna Johnson, a national political correspondent at The Washington Post covering the 2020 presidential election. All right, Jenna, I want to start with you. What do those talking points tell you about the mindset of the Trump campaign going into 2020?
Well, they're trying to be very careful about their messaging. During the last election, the president kind of said whatever he wanted, and the message was whatever people might take away from that. The president still says whatever he wants, but the campaign is being very careful to really echo that messaging, to make very clear to Trump supporters where the president stands, and how they should talk about these things. And it was interesting to hear you read through some of those talking points. I was at the Trump rally in Michigan last week, and almost word for word, those were some of the responses that I was hearing from some of the president's supporters when I would ask them about impeachment or about different various things the president has done.
Okay, so Jenna's talking about message discipline. And my question with those talking points are, is it the campaign taking the talking points of the president and putting them in a document, or are those actual calibrated campaign talking points that they want people using?
Where I live in Virginia, you have to go to the DMV every 10 years to get your photo taken. Otherwise, I've sold cars, renewed licenses, renewed registrations, gotten the emission tests all online. It takes no time at all. So if we could have health care that'd be like that, that'd be terrific. I noticed they put the biggest snowflake on the front page of the Snowflake website, which is the president himself, who can't take any criticism of himself whatsoever. And the other thing is they put out these sort of pat, stupid arguments that if you actually got into a substantive discussion with your relatives, if you use their talking points, you would get creamed rhetorically.
I mean, especially, the question is that supposed to be a document that is meant for persuasion? Or is that really just to rile up the people already with them?
I'm glad that the GOP saved Christmas just in time for Trump to ruin it, to own the libs. Perfect timing, Christmas saved. Now you can just completely screw it up. I don't think this is meant to persuade anyone. I think this is meant to cause division, just like everything else Trump does. And it's meant to create a line between these are the people that agree with me and these are the people who don't. Now I know which family members I can talk to, which family members I can't, who I can trust and who I can't trust. Nobody's going to hear that stuff about Ukraine. Anybody who has read about the Ukraine situation, nobody's going to hear that and think this is an informed person making decisions about our politics. They're going to hear this is a crazy relative who has been consumed by Donald Trump. And at least now you know. Now you know who's crazy, who's sitting at the table.
I'm shocked. I bought these talking points to Family Christmas. I
did?
Totally won the argument.
You did?
I won when my entire family got up from dinner, picked me up and threw me in the ocean. And that was the end of the conversation.
And you're here.
And I'm back. A little cold.
Well, resilient.
It does make me think, he is telegraphing to Democrats what the talking points are going to be, which theoretically gives Democrats an opportunity to prepare and go on offense. But how do you go on offense with these talking points?
Exactly.
Nothing is new in this. This is all the same stuff we've seen from Trump. But what I think it reveals is that his campaign, he's not going to run a persuasion campaign. He's going to run a base campaign. That's what his entire administration is about right now, and that's what his entire campaign is about. It's about firing up his base and turning out as many white working class males as he possibly can, and non-college educated white voters as he possibly can, and not even worrying about trying to persuade. That's what they're doing they're spending a ton of money on digital strategy, and they're not focused on persuadable voters.
All right,
it's all base turnout.
Jenna, if that is true, and this is all about base turnout, and they are not trying to persuade anyone, who then does the Trump campaign want to see as the Democratic nominee?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, the president is obsessed with Joe Biden and has long been very focused on Joe Biden. Depending on who's up or down in the polls, the answers to that can change day to day, week to week. But like another thing with these talking points that we don't want to forget is, I mean, this is a campaign that's really seizing on division in this country. I mean, this country is more divided than it ever has been before. Most politicians will know that division's out there, maybe subtly do things that stoke it, let their surrogates and their supporters go at it. But this is a campaign that is, driving that division themselves. So if you think that challenging your relatives over Christmas dinner is something new, let's just try to think of what 2020 is going to be like. The Democratic candidates that campaigns that I chat with, I mean, everyone's just kind of bracing themselves for next year. They really don't know what to expect, but they know it's going to be nasty. They know it's going to be divisive.
You brought up Joe Biden, so let's stick with Joe Biden. There's a piece in the New York Times about Republicans who might vote for Joe Biden. As voters at Biden events jostle to take pictures with the former vice president and listen to him preach about national unity, they're often thinking about someone else, a dad, a neighbor, or a colleague. They consider the political leanings of people close to them who are uncomfortable with the most liberal presidential contenders, but who hate the chaos of the Trump era and are receptive to the kind of centrist, seasoned candidacy Mr. Biden offers. This has been the core argument of the Biden campaign. Have we gotten to a point where he has won or lost that argument?
Well, it remains to be seen. But yes, it is a return to normalcy. It's, there's this huge mess, and I'm going to clean it up. I'm not going to put forward radical change, but I am going to put forward pragmatic change, whether that's health care with a public option. I'm going to be able to restore our relationships overseas and bring us together domestically. And it's a pretty simple argument. Again, he's not trying to go to the left of the party. He knows there's no space there for him there. And it wouldn't really be authentic to who Joe Biden really is. So his campaign, his advisors are running a campaign that's really just sort of based on who Joe Biden has been his entire career.
But if Trump is, as you're saying, running a campaign based on division, does it then behoove Joe Biden to really run as the uniter in chief, to underscore that piece of what you lay out as basically a three-part message?
Look, if there's anything that I felt when I read this Snowflake website is exhaustion. The rage that people feel, even in the Trump administration, the rage they feel towards libs or the rage they feel towards anybody else. How long can you sustain that kind of anger? How long can you really just dislike everyone around you? And I think that Joe Biden is kind of out there and he's saying, you know what? You don't have to hate everything. You can just be kind of mad about it. I'm not either this way or that way. You can be okay with other Americans again. You don't have to hate them.
At the same time that you have this argument coming from Biden, you also still have the argument coming from Sanders. And all of a sudden, a lot of sort of buzz and support around Sanders. This headline from the New York Times caught my eye. Sanders has a strained relationship with the Democratic establishment, which remains bitter over the division he and his supporters sowed after the 2016 primaries, and chafes at his refusal to engage with the traditional party apparatus. Yet in Iowa and elsewhere, the tension with the party has served only to re-energize Mr. Sanders and his loyalists, who are faithful to him in a way that no other candidate's supporters are. While backers of other Democrats often list 3 or 4 contenders when asked to name their top choice, Mr. Sanders fans are unwavering. This is about a piece about the Democratic establishment taking Sanders seriously. What does it tell us that it is late December and this piece is being written?
Yeah. Well, look, Bernie Sanders has 1 million donors. He's raised the second most amount of money second to Trump, set over $70 million. He's remained relatively consistent in the polls. He recovered from a heart attack. He's been one of the more consistent debaters. If you look at statewide polls and national polls, he's somewhere between 1, 2, or 3. And for him, if he's viable at 15%, which is what he's going to need to be in Iowa and all the different counties and across, this country, he's going to accumulate a lot of delegates. He may not win the nomination, but he is going to accumulate a lot of delegates.
But what does it say that it is this moment in which the establishment is willing to, first of all, do you agree that that's where the establishment is, that they're willing to admit that Sanders may be the nominee?
Well, he may be the nominee.
Right.
I mean, I don't think there's no way around that. I mean, if you look at where he is in the polling, if you look at how he's doing with money, I mean, he's going to be able to stay in all the way to Milwaukee because he's going to be able to raise money all day long.
If you are Bernie Sanders, do you want the establishment wrapping their arms around you? I mean, certainly from an infrastructure vantage point, you do. But in this primary, does it behoove him?
Well, it's certainly been good for his message and his campaign to be the person who's being dumped on by the media and dumped on by the establishment. But the truth is, you could have written this article at any time in the past 8 months. I don't blame Politico for writing it. It's well timed because the primaries are now upon us. But he has always been a front runner. And Biden has led for most of the campaign. But the most enduring feature of this primary so far is how unchanging it has been, with a few exceptions like Warren Rising. So, yeah, of course he could be the nominee.
By the way, his favorables are very high as well. The problem Sanders has is he has a base that holds to him in the same way that Trump does. That's not a problem. The problem is, can he go beyond that base the way Trump is not going to be able to go beyond his base? And I think if you elect someone like Sanders, who represents a radical change in the economy, which, by the way, is by all metrics is going very well, you elect someone like that who wants to change the economy, you introduce a whole set of unknowns, and I think that's going to be very difficult to bring those Republican voters that now Biden is talking about bringing over into his camp. I think it's a tough sell.
Jenna, the other advantage to not being necessarily seen by everyone as the front runner is that he has not necessarily had that moment on the debate stage where everyone has felt the need to rough him up. I wonder if, as everyone takes their holiday break and reads that piece, if that's what we'll see at the next debate.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And also just comments on the trail and where the focus goes. I think for the last few months, there's kind of been this unspoken assumption in some of the other campaigns, among some strategists, even some voters, that Bernie Sanders wasn't going to be in this for the long haul, especially after that heart attack. People thought that was it. And now here we are, a little bit more than a month before the Iowa caucuses. Bernie Sanders is still very much in this with a very loyal following. And so is Joe Biden. And people are realizing that they've been near the top of the polls for a reason, not just because they have name recognition, but because there's voters out there who really like them and are going to stick with them. So we're going to, we have, again, a little over a month till the Iowa caucuses. Who knows how this is going to shake out in that time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.